Somehow, a registered letter for you arrived.
I received a call from my parents' home. It happened just after my mother-in-law's funeral had concluded. She had taken her own life, and her lifeless body was discovered at her home. My mother-in-law had treated me like her own daughter, and she was kind to my daughter, her granddaughter. Why did this happen? Suppressing my grief, I headed back to my childhood home.
Here it is.
My father handed me an envelope with my name on it. Apparently, it was addressed to me. In a familiar handwriting, my mother-in-law had written the stern note, "Read this when my son is not around." This was no ordinary letter. As I read further, anger and fear welled up inside me, and I began to tremble. My name is Peyton, a 33-year-old homemaker. I married Liam, who is the same age as me, after being introduced by a friend. Liam started his own IT startup company after graduating from university, and it has been steadily growing. His family is wealthy, owning various properties and land, with substantial real estate income. Yet, Liam chose to be independent and started his own business, which drew me to him. I grew up without a mother, living with my father until I got married. Even when I was about to marry, I worried about my father.
I'm not old enough to be worried about. Don't think about it.
That's what my father said as he sent me off. Our relationship with Liam's parents was also excellent. My mother-in-law would often say,
"Peyton is like a daughter to me. You can think of me as your real mother."
And my father-in-law would add,
Exactly. We're family now, so don't hesitate to rely on us.
As a newlywed couple, we rented an apartment midway between our parents' homes. Soon after, I discovered I was pregnant, and both my father and my in-laws were delighted. Liam was enthusiastic, saying,
"I need to work even harder from now on."
Eventually, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. However, our joy was short-lived. My father-in-law suffered a heart attack and passed away suddenly. Taking over for my grieving mother-in-law, Liam managed all the funeral arrangements, ensuring everything went smoothly. As for my father-in-law's assets, the family home and land were left to my mother-in-law so she could continue living there. Other properties were also transferred to her, while savings and investments were shared between Liam and my mother-in-law. The inheritance process was handled by Liam.
"I left everything to you, and I'm sorry. Thank you."
Well, it's only natural since we're family, isn't it?
Indeed, even though he runs a small startup, Liam is a company owner, and I began to see him in a new light. As a couple, we decided to use the inherited savings to build a new house near my in-laws' home.
"Peyton, it seems your family's place will be a bit farther away, but how is your father doing?"
My mother-in-law worried about my father, who lives alone, without considering her own situation. "He'll be fine. If I treat him like an old man, he'll scold me instead."
"I see. It's good to know he's doing well."
Seeing my grieving mother-in-law, who had recently lost her husband, I realized I hadn't been considerate enough. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that right after your husband's passing."
"No, being healthy and well is a good thing. Don't worry about me."
With those words, my mother-in-law smiled, and her kindness touched my heart. Since moving into our newly built home, I've often visited my in-laws' house with my daughter. My daughter, who had just started kindergarten, looked forward to playing with my mother-in-law, and above all, I wanted her to stay healthy.
Hey, Grandma, guess what? I learned a new game today. Let me teach you, and we can play together.
"Oh, really? What kind of game is it?"
I watched with a smile as my mother-in-law and daughter played together. I couldn't help but think of my own mother and how I wished she could meet her granddaughter like this.
Liam also visited recently.
It seems Liam, too, was concerned about my mother-in-law being alone at home, as he often stopped by. Little did I imagine what would happen next after that conversation. One evening, while preparing dinner in the kitchen, my phone suddenly rang. It was Liam calling. Since my hands were busy, I missed the call. I assumed he'd call back if it was urgent, and sure enough, he did. The sense of urgency in his voice made my heart race.
Peyton? It's me! Mom is in bad shape. We're heading to the hospital together.
What happened? What's wrong?
Mom might not make it.
Even through the phone, I could sense Liam's shock. Which hospital? I'll come right away. There was no time to waste with dinner preparations. I took my daughter and headed to the hospital where my mother-in-law had been taken. When we arrived at the hospital, Liam was standing outside the treatment room.
Daddy. Where is Grandma? What happened?
Grandma has gone to a faraway place.
What? Why? The innocent question from our young daughter intensified the sadness. When Liam visited my in-laws' house, he found it strange that there was no sign of anyone. He searched for my mother-in-law and discovered her lying on the bed. By then, her breathing had already stopped. Despite calling an ambulance and rushing her to the hospital, it was too late. Next to the bed lay a bottle of sleeping pills, suggesting she might have taken a large dose. Although there was no apparent suicide note, the circumstances strongly indicated that she had taken her own life. Liam, during the police questioning, looked utterly disbelieving, tears streaming down his face as he answered. I felt as if I were trapped in a terrible dream. Could it be that my cheerful mother-in-law had secret troubles, silently suffering? Now, there was no way to confirm it. We arranged for the funeral home to take my silent mother-in-law away. Fortunately, we secured the same funeral venue as my father-in-law's, providing some relief. Liam clung to her, sobbing like a child.
To lose my father just a few years ago, and now my mother, and in such a way.
Liam's eulogy moved the attendees to tears.
I should have talked to her more. If she was troubled, I wish she had confided in me. Why didn't she seek my advice? I can't bear this regret.
Wiping his tears and sniffing, Liam addressed the mourners. Yet, I couldn't shake a lingering question. Since my father-in-law's passing, Liam had been visiting my in-laws' house more frequently. It seemed odd that he would say he hadn't spent enough time with my mother-in-law. Moreover, my mother-in-law's anxious expression when mentioning Liam had always bothered me. All right, I'll head home first and tidy up a bit. I told Liam, and my daughter and I returned home. As soon as I entered, my phone rang. It was my father from my hometown. He had attended my mother-in-law's funeral. Despite having just been together, I wondered what he needed and answered the call.
Peyton, when I got home, there was a registered letter addressed to you. Can you come over here?
Although I was tired from just finishing the funeral, I felt I had to read that letter. So, I hurried to my parents' house with my daughter. I called Liam to let him know that I had received a call from my father.
Huh? Your father just got back from the funeral, didn't he?
Well, it seems there's something he forgot to tell me. He wants to talk directly, so he asked me to come over. It's a bit selfish, isn't it? I feigned a smile.
Take a look at this. Do you have any idea what it's about?
When I arrived at my parents' house, my father showed me an envelope. The familiar handwriting on the address caught my eye. It was my mother-in-law's writing. I took the envelope from my father and quickly opened it. The first thing I saw was,
Please read this where my son can't see it.
that sentence was written in large letters.
By the time you read this, I may no longer be in this world.
The letter began with such an introduction. It meticulously detailed a side of Liam that he had never shown me, a side that involved threatening my mother-in-law to secure her inheritance. Despite publicly leaving most of the inheritance to my mother-in-law after my father-in-law's passing, Liam apparently schemed to claim it for himself. His company was struggling financially, and while my father-in-law was alive, he had been covering the losses. But after his death, that support vanished, so now Liam seemed to be banking on my mother-in-law's inheritance. Was the kind face Liam showed me and our daughter all a facade? As I continued reading the letter, fear made my spine shiver, and anger bubbled up from deep within.
Get away from Liam as soon as possible. I don't know what he's capable of. I worry about you and my granddaughter.
That was the closing line of the letter. I needed to act quickly. But if Liam found out, our safety would be at risk. I devised a plan. When I returned home, acting as if nothing had happened, Liam asked,
What did your father want?
"It's nothing much. He seems to be losing confidence in his health, wondering about the future. He wanted to discuss it with me. It's quite amusing, isn't it?" I exaggerated my response to divert any suspicion Liam might have. "By the way, what are you going to do about cleaning up your parents' house? If you lend me the key, I can start tidying up little by little." Whether disposing of the house or renting it out, we needed to clear out the belongings. I asked Liam about his plans for the house.
We've decided to gather relatives on another day to clean up, so you don't need to do anything until then.
Liam seemed reluctant to have anyone enter the house. "Oh, I see. Let me know if anything comes up."
Thanks. That helps.
The person in front of me and the image painted by my mother-in-law's letter didn't match. It was as if they were two different people. Little did Liam imagine that his hidden side would be exposed a few days later. About a month after my mother-in-law's funeral, relatives gathered at my in-laws' house. While reminiscing about my mother-in-law, we sorted through her belongings. Anything usable would be distributed as mementos, and larger furniture would remain in the house. Liam informed the relatives who had gathered in the living room that arrangements would be made to dispose of the remaining items. Everyone nodded in agreement. Seizing the opportunity, I raised my voice. "I have something to share with everyone here." All eyes turned toward me. After the funeral, I received a letter addressed to me from my mother-in-law. The postmark was just before her passing. Please listen to my mother-in-law's final words. Liam looked surprised.
A letter from Mom? When did that happen?
She sent it by registered mail to make sure it reached me. Let's hear what everyone has to say about how Liam treated his own mother. Liam tried to snatch the letter from my hand in a panic, but he was stopped by the relatives around us. Suppressing my rising anger, I began reading the letter aloud. As the relatives listened, they frowned at my mother-in-law's candid confession about Liam's mistreatment.
That's a lie. It's my mother's misunderstanding. Yes. She's mistaken. There's no way I would do such a thing to my own mother.
Despite his words, Liam's expression was unlike anything I'd seen before, a demonic look. Undeterred, I retorted, "Your company seems to be struggling quite a bit, doesn't it? With no more support from your father, are you now eyeing your mother's inheritance?" I felt bad, but I had to investigate. After reading my mother-in-law's letter, I had hired a private investigator to look into Liam's personal life and the state of his company. Everything in her letter turned out to be true. Furthermore, your mother's inheritance won't be a penny for you.
What? That's ridiculous. I'm her biological son. Since there's no one else, it's only natural that I inherit everything.
Well, it seems things won't go so smoothly for you. Fearing for her safety due to Liam's repeated threats, my mother-in-law had left a will just in case. Although the will hadn't been officially confirmed, according to the letter, it specified that the inherited assets would go to her granddaughter, my daughter, and until she came of age, I would be her guardian.
So, what about me?
Unfortunately for you, there's nothing. Tough luck. Liam's eyes bore hatred as he looked at me. However, I continued without hesitation. By the way, did you notice the security cameras? Today, during a break from cleaning, I reviewed the hidden camera footage placed throughout my in-laws' house as mentioned in my mother-in-law's letter. Liam had discovered the cameras earlier, and I worried he might erase the recordings. But it seemed he hadn't noticed their existence. The footage clearly showed Liam tampering with my mother-in-law's drink and dragging her, semi-conscious from sleeping pills, to the bed. Even his meticulous efforts to avoid leaving evidence were captured. Liam's face twitched, and he trembled. In the next moment, he tried to dash toward the entrance. However, the police officers stationed outside apprehended him. I had already reported the hidden camera footage to the police, who had been investigating my mother-in-law's case due to suspicious circumstances. Now, with the irrefutable evidence of the footage, they had come to secure Liam.
Damn it! Let go!
Liam struggled helplessly as the officers restrained him and put him in the patrol car. I thought it was fortunate that I had entrusted my daughter to my father. I didn't want her to witness Liam in this state.
What should I tell my daughter?
Revealing that her father was a criminal would be too much for a young child. Liam would have to take responsibility for his actions in the years to come. Eventually, the time would come when I'd have to tell my daughter. The weight of that knowledge weighed heavily on my heart. Some days later, in the presence of a lawyer, I opened the will store. As my mother-in-law's letter had indicated, it explicitly stated that all her assets would be inherited by my daughter. Liam apparently denied his actions against my mother-in-law, but when confronted with circumstantial evidence and irrefutable camera footage, he eventually admitted to what he had done. Even if he was desperate for money, I can't fathom the psychology of taking one's own mother's life. My in-laws were kind people, so why did Liam commit such an act? Perhaps there was an unimaginable conflict between parent and child, but even if that were the case, taking a parent's life is unforgivable. Liam and I ended up getting a divorce. Given the circumstances, there were no other viable options.
Hey, when is Daddy coming back?
My daughter, unaware of the situation, asked me. He's busy with work and is in a distant foreign country. That was the best answer I could give at the moment. I returned to my parents' house with my daughter and began living with my father. Eventually, when my daughter grows up, there will come a day when I have to tell her the truth. It weighs heavily on my mind, but for now, I'll do my best with my daughter to honor my mother-in-law's wishes.
How did you like this story? If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to my channel. Until next time.